You know, the idea of like a true name, like sort of like Le Guin or fantasy novel style of like names have power, right? And like there's the name that you call something, but then it has its like true deep name. The true name in my heart of my book is not More Everything Forever. The true name is These Fucking People. So yeah. Because these fucking people.
I can't tell if we're podcasting yet, but yeah. Hello and welcome back to Dystopia Now. I am Kate Willett.
I'm Emil Torres.
Today we're so excited. We have one of our coolest guests ever, even though that's true about all of our guests.
We are delighted to speak with Adam Becker, who is a friend of ours, and he recently published this book, which is titled More Everything Forever. It provides a comprehensive, rich, very detailed overview of essentially the TESCREAL ideologies. It gestures at the religio-eschatological aspect, if you will.
Wow. Okay, look. Yeah, I get it. You have a PhD. Some of us are just here with memes.
Adam is such a jolly character, super fun to talk with, quite funny.
Yeah, I loved this conversation, and I really think that listeners, I think this would be one of your favorite episodes. This was a really fun one.
Absolutely, yes.
So, Adam, welcome to the show. We're so excited to have you. We're both big fans. And when we were talking offline before we started the recording, you said to us that you felt like the true title of your book, the title is actually More Everything Forever, but you felt like the true title was These Fucking People. Yeah. I'm curious if you can expand a little bit on what you mean by these fucking people.
Just note that we only have about an hour. We don't have 8 hours.
Yeah.
The audiobook, I believe, is somewhere around 11 hours.
11 hours.
So, yeah.
Well, that makes sense because I saw it's $18 on Kindle. So I'm like, I better be getting a lot for my money here. There's literally a lot of hours.
Yeah, so we can get through about a tenth of it here. I'll just open it up and start going. And yeah, what do I mean by these fucking people? These tech billionaires and the people who are like carrying water for them. The intellectuals and pseudo-intellectuals carrying water for them, either knowingly or unknowingly. And Emil, who I'm talking about, I know you both know who I'm talking about. But
I just want to say, Emil gets a lot of credit for their hate, but I've been hating a long time as well. I really don't like these fucking people. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I mean, like, look, we're all hipsters here when it comes to hating these people. We hated them before it was cool.
We share the good news about how much they fucking suck.
Exactly.
I should note, I was one of them for a while.
Sure.
So
we forgive you.
Those fuckers.
Yeah, we forgive you.
I mean, 10 years, I was a true believer in the whole TESCREAL worldview.
Yeah.
But yes, now I am allied with both of you.
But I love I'm not going to get us on a huge tangent, but I love that the thing that turns you to the other side, Emil, was that you just met them in real life and your interactions had previously been online, but then immediately upon meeting them, you're like...
That was definitely a part of it. Yeah.
I've been tracking them for a very long time. I've been interested in these people, these fucking people, for a very long time. I was not a true believer. You know, there are things that some of them believe in that I used to believe in. Mm-hmm. I used to believe that space was very obviously like the place where the future of humanity was going to play out, that it was inevitable that we would go and colonize space and colonize the galaxy. I believed that when I was a kid because it's the future that was depicted in the science fiction that I liked. And then I grew up and learned more about space and also learned more about not just the difference between fiction and reality, but like the idea of fiction as a lens that we look at the current world through and as a text rather than, oh, this is a literal instruction manual. And that made it easier when I finally learned enough and thought about it enough to realize, oh yeah, space is not the place. Space is not where the future lies.
I just want to say for listeners who might not be familiar with Adam's work, definitely check out his book. But just to contextualize a little bit, Adam has, I think, a PhD in astrophysics. So you really know about space. You're not coming into this as some kind of space lay person. You're not just making up stuff like these stupid fucks are. Yeah.
Nor are you epistemically trustworthy, way a philosopher like me does when I talk about this stuff. So you have domain expertise on this issue.
Yeah.
And authority to say that space colonization is just a pipe dream. So I actually think that your discussion of the problems with colonizing Mars is probably the best I've ever read.
Thank you.
Do you want to give us just an overview of why trying to colonize Mars is a terrible idea.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so credit where credit's due. The one thing that I can say about Elon Musk's plans for Mars is that his objective, his overall end goal regarding Mars, has been consistent. There's all sorts of other things that he's been very inconsistent about regarding Mars, and of course lots of other things in the world, when he's going to send a rocket to Mars. But he has been saying for years that he wants to put 1 million people on Mars by 2050 in order to serve as a backup for humanity in the event of an extinction level event of some kind here on Earth, some sort of catastrophe. He has cited an asteroid strike, nuclear war.
He's described it as fundamentally a humanitarian
Yes,
project.
he has. Yeah.
Well,
He
he's
has said-
it's USAID for it's the replacement actually for USAID. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. We'll save humanity by sending people to Mars, and that will make up for denying funding that was saving thousands or millions of lives. Sure. Anyway, and he's not only been consistent about this, though, he's also been very specific. Again, not specific about, he hasn't been consistent about like launch windows, but he's been specific about what he wants for this colony. And in particular, he has said that it needs to survive even if the rockets from Earth stop coming, because otherwise it won't be like independent. It won't be an independent backup for humanity like he's been saying. This is roughly the stupidest idea that I've ever heard.
Yeah.
And that the basic reason for that is that Mars is absolutely terrible, and there was nothing that could happen here on Earth that would make Earth less hospitable, less habitable for humans than Mars. Mars is just unbelievably bad. There's not enough gravity, there's not enough atmosphere, and there's no magnetosphere. There's no magnetic field. And so without the atmosphere and without the magnetic field, those are the two things that protect us here on the surface of the Earth from radiation coming from the sun and deep space. Without those, there's just too much radiation at the surface of Mars.
One thing that really put it in perspective for me was when you were talking about what it would be like for women or people of all genders to try to give birth on Mars. If you want to expand on that a little.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we don't know is the answer. Because, Martian gravity is 1/3 that of Earth. There's nothing that we are going to do to change that. Musk likes to talk about terraforming Mars, making it more like Earth, and has proposed at least one plan to do that. That plan doesn't work. Other people propose other plans. They don't work either. Mars is just too terrible. There's not enough of the things there that life from Earth needs in order to survive. And at best, what you're going to do is you're going to live in tunnels underground. But even in the most optimistic of those terraforming scenarios, there's still the problem of gravity, right? None of those scenarios add to Mars's gravity because you can't really do that. It's just a function of the size and mass of Mars, which is not changing. We don't know what effects Martian gravity would have on gestation, birth, and development of infants and children. We just don't know.
Nobody's ever given birth in microgravity, and no child has ever developed in those
Right,
conditions.
and that's microgravity, right? This is 1/3 gravity, which in some ways is even harder, right? If you want to test the effects of microgravity on a biological organism, forget people. Say you just want to test it on I don't know, a cat. I'm picking cats deliberately because I like cats.
Yeah, I was about to get defensive. I was like, not my babies.
No, I love cats. That's why I'm picking them for this, because I want to show how bad this is. If you want to check out the effect of microgravity on a cat, what you do, it's a bad idea, but you bring it to the International Space Station. Right? The International Space Station has microgravity. There's essentially no gravity there. It would be very difficult to create an environment that would be safe for a cat and safe for the International Space Station from the cat up there. But it could be done. We could imagine doing it if there was a really good reason. We could imagine developing a system and a plan to send a cat up there.
No.
And we could even, we could even send 2 cats and have them procreate and see how
you have
that
to
goes.
spay and neuter your pets. I hate this whole plan.
I know. This is already a bad idea.
Yeah.
But Mars is 1/3 gravity. We do not know what effect that has, and you can't really simulate it. You can't simulate it here on Earth. You can't simulate it in the International Space Station. You would have to send the cats to Mars. And then even if the cats turned out okay, well, then, you'd need to test it with, chimps or something, and then if it works out okay for the chimps, then you cross your fingers and hope that it works out okay for the humans. If it doesn't, if it turns out that the cats can't do that or the chimps can't do that or whatever, or God forbid if you just go straight to testing it with a human and it doesn't work out, well, then you'd have to live in a centrifuge for 9 months.
Oh my God. I mean, you can't even get cats to the vet. I don't think that we're gonna, I mean, you can, but it's very difficult. We're not getting those guys to Mars. It's just not happening. Yeah.
No. And then you might have to put that human baby into that centrifuge for another 18 years to grow up and develop, because we don't, like, if it could be that gravity just doesn't work for human growth and development. We don't know. It might be fine. We just do not know. And the experiments that you would have to do to find out would be incredibly costly and, I think, unethical.
There are 2 lines from your book that I absolutely love.
Thank you.
In the context of space colonization.
Yeah.
So one is, I think I'm more or less quoting when you say the problems with Mars is that the radiation is too high, the gravity is too low, there's no air, and the soil is poisonous.
Yes.
Right? So you also have this line where you say, if somebody were to walk outside on the surface of Mars, as they asphyxiate, the saliva on their tongue would boil.
Yes, that's right.
And the other line, which I think is really fantastic, I'd never thought about it this way, is that Earth, not only in its present condition, far more habitable than Mars, but Earth was more habitable in the aftermath of the massive 10 or 12 kilometer diameter asteroid that slammed into the Yucatan Peninsula 66 million years ago and killed off all of the non-avian dinosaurs. Even after that, Earth was more habitable than Mars. And you've said before in interviews, and I think in the book, how do I know this? Because mammals survive.
Yeah.
Exactly.
You put a cat or another mammal on Mars, they're going to die immediately for all the reasons that you enumerate in your book so compellingly.
Thank you. That's exactly correct. Look, when that asteroid hit, it was a terrible day here on Earth. It was really bad. That is, it's not the worst mass extinction in the history of complex life on Earth, but it is the worst single day.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, because the other mass extinctions that were worse took longer. Whereas this one was blink and you'll miss it in a way. Like the inciting event took a fraction of a second, and most of the aftermath was over within 10 years. It's really pretty fast. Like the day itself was horrifying. You've got this massive impact that, creates enormous tsunamis all over the planet, an earthquake larger than any in recorded history by many orders of magnitude, enormous amounts of rock and debris ejected out into deep space, and a lot of it ejected out and then comes back in and reheats the atmosphere, leading to this pulse of heat that cooks many creatures at the surface.
So they're actually broiled.
Yeah.
Many of the dinosaurs were just broiled.
Yeah.
And also, it's just interesting to note that there would have been such a massive release of rock on Earth's crust that it may be the case that there are dinosaur bones on the moon.
Yeah.
That they would have reached,
wow.
their little fragments out there.
Yeah. No, and that's not actually fossils. That would be bone fragment.
Yes.
Because if a bone fragment from a dinosaur landed on the moon 66 million years ago, it got a little buried since then, but I don't think that there are any geological processes on the moon that would fossilize it. I think it's just still
I think you're totally right.
a shard of bone.
Yeah.
But I'm not an expert on that, though. I don't know. But what I do know is that there are widespread wildfires, right? There was also this fine dust was ejected into the atmosphere and basically cut off most of the sunlight to the surface, and that cut the bottom out of the food chain. And so almost anything that survived the initial impact died that way. And within 10 years, something like 75 to 80% of all species that had been around before that impact went extinct, and something like 99.9% of all individual organisms died. And yet, there was still radiation protection at the surface. There was still 1G, one regular Earth gravity. There was still plenty of oxygen in the atmosphere. There was still a survivable temperature range. There was still a thick atmosphere. All of these things that Mars just completely fucking lacks.
Yeah.
And so there were mammals around before, there were mammals around after, and we're descended from those mammals. Those mammals could not survive on Mars. Exactly. Like, it's just absolutely preposterous.
Yeah.
The best argument that Musk has, the best one he's got, he points out correctly when the few times he's been pushed on this, he says in about 500 million to 1 billion years, the sun is going to heat up enough that the oceans here on Earth are going to vaporize, and then we'll get a greenhouse effect from the water in the atmosphere, and that'll be pretty much it for life on Earth, probably. And that's true. All of that's true. You know what else is true? 500 million years ago, there was essentially no complex life on Earth. 1 billion years ago, I don't believe there was any multicellular life on Earth at all.
Yeah.
The list of things that we as a species need to be concerned about, not just in the short term and the medium term, but like the long term and even the very long term, essentially does not include that problem, because it is very unlikely that we are going to even make it 500 million or 1 billion years. 500 million years is a very long time. And there are many other things that we need to handle between now and then. It's not, we have to deal with this right now. We should be so lucky as to have that problem. We are not going to be, by the way, spoiler alert, there are going to be other things. And if somehow our species lasts like 500 million years, I am struggling. I do not believe there is any multicellular species on the planet Earth that has ever lasted that long under any conditions. And even if we do, there's a pretty good shot that like random processes like genetic drift will lead us to not be recognizably human anymore. And which is not to say that like our descendants' problems are not our own. Yeah, we should care for our descendants. But like our ability to forecast, and I guess this takes us to some of the other themes in the book, our ability to forecast the problems that those beings will have, that our descendants, whatever form they will take, will have that far in the future, is pretty bad. Yeah, we're pretty confident about the sun thing. I really think that if 100 years from now, we have a solution to eking out a meager existence off of this planet with massive assistance from the people left here on Earth, but we have completely wrecked the ecosystem with global warming and also had nuclear war, I really think that our descendants will feel that our priorities were just slightly off.
There's a theme that I hear in this conversation, but I think it's also extremely present in your book, which is like this arrogance, for lack of a better word. These people truly, not only do they think that they can solve all the problems of humanity, they think that just the laws of physics even do not apply to them. The laws that apply to all of us, religion or whatever, basically that they're going to be able to become immortal. I mean, it's truly crazy. Like they hear like, the only things inconsistent in life are death and taxes. And they're like, neither of those for me, bitch, and I'm like, where do you think this arrogance is coming from, having looked at all of these ideologies together? Is this something that were they like pre-existing narcissists? Are they feeding each other this shit high on their own supply?
Oh man, it's such a good question. And it is basically all of those things and some other stuff. I'm going to give you a long answer. Well, I mean, you've already seen, I think, I only give long answers. I'm going to give you a long answer to that question, and it's going to sound like I'm going kind of sideways, but I promise it's a real answer. There's a quote from someone on the internet, I don't remember who, but I think it showed up like on a message board about 15, 20 years ago, or maybe a blog, I don't remember where. But it's a quote I really like, and it's something like, there are two books that can change the course of a bookish, introverted 15-year-old's life: Lord of the Rings and Atlas Shrugged. One of them is a completely unrealistic fantasy world that can endure a unhealthy obsession with the unrealistic heroes, leading to like permanently stunted emotional growth and like social development. And the other one involves orcs.
I knew where that joke was going because you know what? I write jokes for a living, and I saw how you set that up perfectly just to be able to knock it down. And I appreciate it. Yeah.
I mean, again, it's not mine, and it's such a good line.
Yeah.
But you want to see someone whose life, I would argue, is ruined in this way. Peter Thiel.
Yeah.
Right? And Peter Thiel, you mentioned Death and Taxes. There's this wonderful profile of him by George Packer in The New Yorker from, I want to say, about 2010. That's actually titled No Death, No Taxes.
Oh, wow.
And and the thing is, it's around that time, it's like a couple years earlier, maybe 1 year earlier, that he writes that essay that everybody quotes, where he says, I no longer think freedom and democracy are compatible. And from context, by freedom, he means free markets, not really anything else that we might want to call freedom. But people quote that line all the time, and rightly so. It's a horrifying thing for him to have said, and I don't think he should ever live it down. But I find other things in that essay to actually be more interesting and revealing. From the same essay, he says quite explicitly that he doesn't believe in death and taxes as inevitabilities. And he says something to the effect of, I remain true to the faith of my teenage years, that taxation is theft and death is avoidable. And I'm like, okay, buddy, let's put aside taxation as theft and we can put aside the political conversation and why that's like a fundamentally juvenile perspective. And let's also even put aside that you think that death is avoidable because, like, I can introduce you to my friend, the second law of thermodynamics, and we can have a conversation about that. But let's put that aside and let's focus on the first half of that sentence. True to the faith of your teenage years. Man, if I ever said I was true to the faith of my teenage years, like in the most important respects of my worldview, I would like want to walk around with a fucking paper bag over my head. Like, do you not learn anything since you were like 15?
Yeah.
Like, the whole point of being a cringeworthy teenager and like going through all of the crap that you go through in your teenage years, no matter who you are, is that you build yourself into an adult and learn who you are and learn how you want to be in the world. And like the idea that what you learned is that you're always right and that all of the shit that you wrote in your journal while you were like listening to emo music, and I guess for Teal it'd be like 1980, like so pre-emo, I don't know. I guess anyway, I'm not going to get into what his musical taste may or may not be, and we've all made bad choices. But the point is, like, I said and did shit when I was 15 that horrifies me now.
Yeah.
We all did.
We all did. It's part of growing up.
Yeah.
It's an important part of growing up. If you are not at least somewhat horrified and embarrassed by things that you said and did and believed when you were 15, I would argue there's something fundamentally wrong with you.
Yeah.
And that there's a way in which you never grew up. And Peter Thiel, I think, has decided that he doesn't need to grow up, that he is exempt from the challenges and problems and collective struggles of being a human in this world. It's quite clear that he doesn't really care about those things, right? This is the guy who hesitated when he was asked if it'd be bad if humanity went extinct, right? And this is not me saying that Peter Thiel is stupid. Although I will say, and this is a separate rant, although a related one, after writing the book I wrote, I'm no longer sure that I think the words like smart or intelligent by themselves like really mean anything.
Emil, you've talked about reaching that same conclusion, and I wonder if that's the result, the natural result of spending so much time thinking about people who are, you know, considered brilliant and are in some ways, but that just have fucking idiotic ideas all day long.
We just talked about this the last episode.
Yeah.
As well. For me, so very briefly, the idea of intelligence is very similar to the idea of being skilled, right? If someone says, oh, you should meet my friend Joe, they're really skilled.
Yeah.
You know, I'd be like, that means nothing to me. In what way?
Exactly.
There are a million ways to be skilled. Some people are super skilled at one task and terrible at other tasks. I think it's the exact same with intelligence. So when someone says, oh, you meet my buddy, they're utterly brilliant, they're super smart, they're really intelligent. I have no idea what that means. That means they may have zero insights about philosophy or life, or know nothing about biology, but know a ton about physics.
Yeah.
It's just as a broad descriptor, it's pretty vacuous to me because I don't think there's anything which is intelligence simpliciter or as such.
No, I completely agree with you. And this is like where I am on this. And so sentences, what really got me thinking about this was that I kept seeing a particular like sentence form show up when I was doing research for this book. I mean, obviously there was also stuff about eugenics that I was seeing in researching the book that got me thinking about this. But really the more direct prompt was that I kept seeing sentences like, oh, he's really smart, but he's really intelligent, but he's real smart, but he's got terrible politics. He's real smart, but he's a racist. I'm like, okay, what does smart mean?
Yeah.
But what the fuck are we talking about? And yet, it's very clear that these fucking people do believe in something like intelligence simpliciter, and actually to bash away again at somebody who richly deserves it, Peter Thiel. Much less famous piece of work by Peter Thiel is a video online from a panel that he was on in like 2009, actually around the same time that he wrote that essay where he said freedom and democracy were incompatible, give or take a year, I think. It's a panel he was on at a Singularity Summit with Eliezer Yudkowsky and Aubrey de Grey, longevity researcher. And I think the panel's name was like Changing the World or Saving the World, something like that.
And by the way, Thiel has funded both of those.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, he's given money to, I think it was the Methuselah Foundation, which is run by de Grey, and then Yudkowsky's Machine Intelligence Research Institute, which is originally the Singularity Institute, that got initial funding from Thiel. So he has extensive connections to individuals we've been discussing on the podcast who are associated with the TESCREAL movement, or what you would refer to as the ideology of technological salvation. That's your term for it, and it's fantastic.
Thank you.
Different terminology, but very similar idea as far as I could tell.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
No, it is a similar idea. I came across your work with Timnit on TESCREAL while I was working on my book and had already articulated this idea of this ideology of technological salvation and was like using that as a frame for this book. And then I came across that and I thought, oh, this is fantastic. This is exactly what I'm talking about, but in a more academic way, whereas I'm trying to like present this to a more public and wider audience. So no, I think the two ideas are fundamentally identical or almost identical.
May I add something else? Which is just that the fact that you hit upon this idea, technological salvation, is really encouraging to me because I think it exemplifies a broader phenomenon, which is that a number of scholars have independently converged on the very same claim, which is that these ideologies, from transhumanism to long-termism, that's what you're discussing, even though you don't use the term TESCREAL, these ideologies are really important. They're an integral piece to the explanatory picture for understanding what is going on in Silicon Valley.
Yes.
So that's encouraging that you get, people like Anita Seychen, who's a professor of media studies, who introduced this term techno-eugenics, right? You have people like Douglas Rushkoff talking about the mindset.
Yeah.
All of these are terms within different phraseologies that are essentially talking about the same thing. So I think that's great. I think it's very cool that you only came across the term TESCREAL after you were like, there is something really interesting here.
Yeah.
And it has to do with these bizarre, like, futurological visions of colonizing space, becoming post-human, and so on.
One thing that this conversation is making me think of is with people like Musk and Thiel, actually specifically those two men, I feel less frustrated talking about them because your average lib is going to agree that Peter Thiel is quite evil. I mean, he sits there and he's like sweating and saying that he might be the Antichrist. Okay, it wasn't quite that, but very close. And there's no convincing necessary. What I personally find much more frustrating, my bone to pick, is the way that these ideologies make their way into liberal spaces. Like, okay, you talk in the book about effective altruism and open philanthropy. Open philanthropy is funding like a huge amount of think tanks that are producing policy for the Democratic Party. There's like Vox, which is a very liberal publication, has Future Perfect, their effective altruism vertical. In terms of what these guys think about natalism, I'm seeing like birth rate articles everywhere these days, including in like liberal and leftist aligned publications, and AI safety. Like I'm hearing really mainstream people take on the AI doom narrative, and it makes sense in some ways, but I guess it's just, okay, let's just say that if someone says to you, okay, look, yeah, some tech billionaires are weird, but there's nothing wrong with effective altruism. What is bad about giving your money to charity? Like, what is bad about imagining an AI that could, potentially do medical advances that would save all these lives? I guess, what's your sort of perspective or answer to people who are like, yeah, there's a good side and a bad side of what these people are doing, but it could be harnessed to liberal or even progressive ends?
Yeah, this is, I would say, like one of the problems that I had with trying to frame my book for talking about it, like for the public and conversations with like marketing team at my publisher and stuff like that. Not to say anything bad about the marketing team at my publisher, they're amazing. Just saying this is a problem not with them, but like inherent with dealing with the subject, which you're like pointing at, which is that like people on the left, I think broadly understand that there is something wrong with billionaires. And tech billionaires in particular now, certainly, since a lot of them have gone mask off and supported Trump and like and openly supported fascism. But when it comes to these other movements, I think that there's been a fairly successful effort to frame the conversation around tech in general and AI in particular as being on a spectrum. And at one end, you have the tech billionaires who are really excited and about AI and its potential, or the potential for people to invest a lot of money into AI and make a lot of money. And like the exemplar of that has got to be Mark Andreessen, right? About which come back to in a minute, along with the thing I was going to say about that video from Peter Thiel. But then at the other end, you have the people saying, no, but AI is very powerful and dangerous and could destroy the world. And you have the sort of originator of the modern version of that idea, right, Yudkowsky. And so I think that because both ends of that spectrum have been very good at framing the debate as being along that spectrum, there's this idea that, oh yeah, if you don't like tech billionaires, then this narrative of existential risk from AI is something that you should be naturally friendly toward. It should be a natural ally to the left. And it is true, I think, that like it's possible to make common cause with some of the people who really believe in existential risk from AI, right? But only to a point. Because the fact is that there is like almost no difference between those two perspectives. It's not that they're two ends of the spectrum of available positions, it's that the difference between them is paper thin. And really, they accept all of the same premises about the world and about AI. They accept all of the same conclusions. There's just one little thing at the very end that they disagree about, whether it's going to lead to utopia or dystopia, paradise or apocalypse. And otherwise, they're like, oh yeah, super intelligent AI is coming. AGI is a coherent thing. It's probably just around the corner. Scale might be all you need, so on and so forth. And the arguments being given for all of those positions are the same. Take a look at the effective accelerationists, who always make me want to throw up in my mouth a little bit. And Mark Andreessen, of course, has thrown in his hat with them.
Wait,
and
I want to tell you something that I think
Yeah.
you might enjoy. You know,
Yeah, please.
we've had this conversation on the show. You know, the EAC abbreviation that they have.
Yeah.
It actually sounds like throwing up in your mouth.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, they're pretty awful. But probably, okay, so early on, when I had finished the first clean, good draft of the book, but I was still in edit, I was relying on a very small number of people for feedback, because I'm a big believer that, like, if you ask too many people for feedback, then your writing is going to start looking like it was done by committee, or worse, by AI. But I have a dear friend who is also a writer who I trust, and whose opinion I take very seriously. And I sent him the manuscript, and he was looking at it. And he got to the chapter where I talk about the effective accelerationists and Andreessen, and among other things. And he got to the part where they, from the EAC manifesto, where they describe themselves, I think, in a very revealing way. They call themselves effective altruism, but based. And my friend sent me that quote and said, I can't even with the quotes in this chapter. What the fuck? These fucking people. But I do actually think that description that they gave of themselves, we can have conversations about what the hell based means in this context, but they are right that they are a lot like the effective altruists.
Yeah.
And yet they set themselves at opposition to each other. I went, for research purposes for the book, a scene that I didn't ultimately end up including in the book. I went to a protest that the Stop AI people were running outside of OpenAI headquarters. And it was very interesting and revealing. And
who are the Stop AI people?
Yes, of course. The Stop AI people are people who believe that existential risk from AI is so great that we need to just shut down AI research right now. And they protest outside of all of the major AI research labs and AI companies. And so they had a protest out in front of OpenAI headquarters. And an effective accelerationist counter-protester showed up.
Oh my God.
With really stupid flag that they have taken on as theirs. It's the join or die political cartoon from the late 1700s, with the snake cut into different parts.
Yeah.
Each one labeled with one of the original 13 colonies in the US. And so instead of saying join or die, they put a network map over that image and gave it the caption accelerate or die. Oh. And what does, first of all, ugly. Just not an appealing looking logo. Second, I'm sorry, What? There was actually a lovely essay I read recently, and I'm not sure that I agree with it, but I agree with the spirit of it, I think, that basically a lot has been lost in the era of the internet. I think a lot of people have written about the problem with shame no longer seeming to be effective, but this essay pointed at a particular kind of shame, which is the shame that someone feels if you ask them, what the fuck are you talking about?
Oh my God.
Because sometimes a well-timed, hey, what the fuck are you talking about, can do a lot to set somebody straight. It's like,
I'm going to keep that one in my pocket.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah.
Back when I was in the test girl movement, I'd go out to bars, for example, with friends and talk about the long-termist transhumanist visions.
Yeah.
And this is essentially the response that I would
Yes.
invariably get. People wouldn't couch it exactly like that. There was just perplexity. So why does it matter if we create these huge computer simulations full of trillions and trillions of digital people? You know, Nick Bostrom estimates 10 to the 58 digital people in the future.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that you also pointed at one of the answers to the question from earlier about why they believe this stuff. And I also think that it also points to like part of your own journey out of this community, right? Because it's very easy to keep believing this stuff if everyone you talk with also believes it. And so you have to maintain contacts outside of your own ideological bubble. Otherwise, you're in deep trouble. And this is also part of what prompted me to write this book in the first place. Was I live out here in the Bay, and I'm encountering these people at parties and like friends of friends. And
I'm really
sometimes,
sorry.
Friends. Yeah, no, look, and discovering, oh, wait, what are they talking about? And like getting the contact with people outside of my own ideological bubble. And then that forced me to think, okay, what do I think of this? And the conclusion I came to was, I don't think very much of it. I think it's pretty bad. Going back to the earlier thing about Peter Thiel in that video, these people have no idea how the world works. Their pictures of the world are just so radically oversimplified. And by the way, I'm saying that as a physicist, right? As a physicist, we're famous physicists for oversimplifying the world and saying, okay, there's within physics a famous joke that involves a physicist approximating a cow as a sphere. And so we pejoratively call our own oversimplifications spherical cows, right? Yeah. And yet, these people, even these people who, claim to be really intelligent and claim their wealth as proof of that, I guess Thiel's never said he thinks he's really smart, but people treat him as though he's just generally intelligent about everything. Thiel does not understand the very simple point that just because you have skill in one area does not mean that you are going to have skills in other areas.
Some people call that like engineer's disease, I've heard.
Right, exactly,
Yeah.
which I talk about in my book. And I think Thiel really does believe in like this very naive and unsupportable idea of, as you called it, Emil, intelligence simpliciter. And as proof of that, this is why I brought up that panel earlier. On that panel, at one point, Thiel says something to the effect of, people only or almost only get PhDs in physics as a kind of intellectual one-upsmanship or status game to show that they are the smartest people in the room, and that a lot of really good brain power is being wasted on string theory, and that string theorists should be given a choice to either work on AI or longevity, because those are both way more important to the human project. Again, you say something like this and then you walk around without a bag over your face. It's an embarrassingly ignorant thing to say, but two main things from all of that mess for me. The first, look, Albert Einstein was a genuinely incredible physicist. That does not mean that if his interest in physics had been, discouraged when he was a kid or even as a young adult, and then he was diverted or forced into, history, studying history or studying medicine or whatever, that he would have been just as brilliant and impactful in those other areas. That is not how intelligence works. That is not how genius works. And I very hesitant to use the word genius. I'm not convinced that genius is a good descriptor of a person. It's more of people used to say touched by genius, and I feel like that's actually better. But anyway, the point is, like, just because you're really amazing at one area of intellectual inquiry does not mean that you're really amazing at every area of intellectual inquiry. Exactly. That is engineer's disease. The other thing, though, and this just makes me really sad for Peter Thiel, which is I don't spend a lot of time feeling bad for billionaires, but I feel a little bad for Peter Thiel when I think about this. He's really telling on himself. right? The idea that you would only pursue, and I mean, sure, I have a PhD in physics, so I guess maybe I'm biased. But the idea that you would only pursue a PhD in physics to prove that you're the smartest person in the room, first of all, I gotta say, if you feel a deep-seated need to prove that you're the smartest person in the room, please, for your own sake, do not go get a PhD in physics, because you'll be forcibly reminded over and over
You'll
again
be in
that
a
you
room
were,
with
in
smarter
fact,
people.
not the smartest person in the room. This is really devastating for your ego.
See, that's why I never got a PhD in physics.
Yes,
It's just-
exactly, yeah.
I'm just like, I'm already confident with myself, you know?
Right.
Have you ever seen that comedy sketch where there's it's a Mitchell and Webb sketch?
Oh, I love Mitchell and Webb,
yeah. So there's a neurosurgeon.
Oh, yes.
And he's
yes.
at a party.
I know the one you're thinking of. Yeah.
Yeah, so he's walking around. He's very arrogant, super cocky. Everybody he talks to, he says, "I'm a neurosurgeon. You know, what you do, like, oh, that sounds difficult. But, you know, it's not neurosurgery." And then finally, there's another guy who enters the room with a little bit of gray right here. And the neurosurgeon says, "Hi, you know, I'm a neurosurgeon. What do you do?" And the other guy says, "Oh, I'm a scientist. I mainly work with rockets."
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That's so funny.
Exactly. Yeah. No, I love that sketch. Also, I think a different Mitchell and Webb sketch I think about a lot with regard to Teal specifically, which is the "Are We the Baddies" sketch.
Oh, yeah. We are the baddies. Yeah.
Well, because the company is named Palantir. It's literally named Palantir. How do you work there and not wonder, are we the baddies?
Yeah.
Like, seriously. Anyway, but going back to the thing that I feel bad about for Peter Thiel is that it's very clear from him saying that he doesn't understand the idea of pursuing an intellectual passion for its own sake, or perhaps any passion for its own sake, right?
Yeah.
Like, he thinks that everything is just some kind of status game. And so he thinks that everybody else thinks that too. And that's a really sad and impoverished way to go through life. And so I can see where if you are so hurt and damaged that you believe that you might lash out at the world, but that doesn't mean that I feel okay about, like, him lashing out at the rest of us by trying to destroy democracy and make the world just a much worse place.
One idea that I think really all the people that you talk about in your book share, or set of ideas, there is this kind of taken as gospel among Silicon Valley billionaires right now that AGI, artificial general intelligence, is close, that we are on the path there. And also that once this happens, within a short time, we will reach the technological singularity. And I enjoyed your opinion on this. So I'm curious if you could tell us, what do you think about these ideas? Do you think they're true?
And may I tag a question on to that?
Absolutely.
No.
But I want to point out, you said we only have an hour and we are at 57:42.
It's like a game show. You have to answer quick.
Yes.
Yeah.
You will have a solid 30 seconds to answer these two very difficult questions. So this actually takes us back to the very beginning of our conversation. We were talking about colonizing Mars.
Yeah.
So one of the responses that some of these ideologues of technological salvation would give to you in saying, you know, the Martian environment is completely inhospitable to biological human beings. And they'll say, yeah, but maybe that's exactly why we need to become artificial beings. So there are two options here. One is to artificialize ourselves, right? So like upload our minds to computers, for example. The other is to create separate autonomous entities in the form of AGI. So like ChatGPT would be an example. Or let's say ChatGPT like 8. That's a system that it's not an extension of us, but it exists independent of us. So that's one possibility, create this population of these AGI, send them to Mars, or just to upload our own minds so that we can go there. In the book, you provide some really compelling arguments against both of these ideas. Piggybacking on Kate's question about AGI, maybe you could also address the problems with mind uploading too, if you don't mind.
Absolutely, yeah. Sure.
This is a big question.
It's okay. Let's, do you have one of those chess clocks that we could, like, you just tap it and then, like, anyway.
We're a quarter of a way through the podcast now.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, like I said, we'll have time to cover roughly 1/10 of the material in the book. I'll just start reading. Look, I actually feel, in a way, the best answer I can give to both questions is the same answer, which is that the brain is probably the most complex object that we're aware of. And there's been a long...
In the known universe.
Yeah, in the known universe. Yeah,
To say nothing of the soul, if that exists.
Sure. Putting aside questions of the soul, yeah, exactly. There's been a long intellectual history of comparing the brain or analogizing the brain to various machines. Leibniz famously had that windmill argument, and it wasn't meant to be like a serious comparison. He wasn't saying that he really thought that the brain was like a mill, but he did make the comparison. Others compared it to clock, to hydraulic systems of various kinds. Freud, I think, actually had hydraulic analogies in mind when he was developing his own theories about repression. People compared it to telegraph networks, telephone networks, computers, the internet, right?
So basically, over time, as we've developed new technologies,
Yeah.
we keep looking at them thinking, oh, maybe that's what the brain
Right,
is
exactly. Yeah, it's like you look at the most complex artificial machine that you were aware of and say maybe the brain is like that. And there's this guy, Matthew Cobb, who has a great book called The Idea of the Brain. I think he's a zoologist and historian of science, and he has a wonderful line, which I quote in my book, because he said it better than I could. He said something like, look, the brain is more like a computer than it is like a clock, but it's not really like either of those things.
Yeah.
And the fundamental difference, like the most important difference, is that the brain was not designed. The brain was not built by anyone with any intention in order to do anything. And so it's just like operating under a fundamentally different kind of like architectural logic, in that it doesn't really have an architectural logic.
This is going to be pretty offensive to our fundamentalist Christian listeners, but it's good to hear all sides of the debate.
Yeah, I think you're fundamental.
Teach the controversy.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can have a separate episode about what they might make of an atheist Jew like me. But yeah, anyway. But yeah, look, there's that scene at the end of the book where I'm at that dinner party and people are talking about when they think AGI is coming, what they think the timeline to AGI is. And someone says that there's, 100 billion neurons in the human brain, and we're pretty close to neural network models that have 100 billion nodes, and there's no reason why it should take more than about 5 years to get to that extra factor of 10. So he said 5 years or something like that. The fact is that the nodes in a neural network are not very much like real neurons. They're architecturally inspired by neurons, but they do not bear much of a resemblance to neurons, and there's no good reason to think that if you just mash enough of them together, you're going to end up with something capable of doing everything that the human brain does. And of course, the other thing is that the human brain is not everything that makes us human and lets us do the things that we do, because we are not our brains. We are not even our nervous systems. We are our bodies in our environments. So you need more than just a brain. There is, consequently, no good reason to think that uploading a human mind into a computer, somehow reading it off of the brain and putting it into a computer, there's no good reason to think that even makes sense. Inherent in that idea is not just the analogy to the brain as a computer, but this sort of software model of the mind, that the mind is the software that runs on the human brain as a hardware. And that is an analogy that has serious limits and is not true. And there is very good reason to think that is just not the right way to think about what's going on up here at all. And given that, it also means that thinking about AGI in terms of, well, if we get enough nodes in our neural network such that we have the complexity of the human brain, then we'll have an AGI. You don't even know what the complexity of the human brain is. You haven't even measured it if your measure is the number of neurons or the number of nodes in the neural network, right? Because a neuron in the human brain is more complex than a node in a neural network. And
much more complex.
Yeah, a lot more complex. Exactly.
Yeah.
And this article of faith that AGI is coming soon and that you can upload a brain. And this is, by the way, the same sci-fi pseudo-religious faith that animates not one but two of Musk's major business ventures, right? XAI and Neuralink. There is nothing to justify that faith and a lot to say that it just does not work. and the historical origins of this, of course, are not in science. They are in science fiction and religion. I know that we got to end. I'm going to end, again, quoting somebody else.
I mean, I thought you did a really amazing job tying all those questions together. When we added the second really long question, I was like, is he going to pull it off? But you did.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I think part of the reason I could do that, which and part of the reason why it was doable in my book to take all of these different ideas and tie them together and show what the problem is without running into the what the fuck are you talking about problem, because it is really difficult when talking about these fucking people
Thank you.
It's very difficult to explain them without sounding crazy yourself, but we, like, not just me, but we have access to a tool that they don't. Because, to quote Adrian Daub, author of an excellent book called What Tech Calls Thinking, Silicon Valley is a place that likes to pretend that it doesn't have a history.
Yeah.
And so we have an advantage in that we can actually look at the intellectual history of these ideas in a way that these people are not just unable to, but like really unwilling to. And that makes it much easier to see, oh, there's a problem right there.
All right, can I close things out with a quick comment?
Yeah, sure.
It was absolutely wonderful to chat with you. I would say in closing for our listeners, my opinion is that there are two broad reasons for buying and reading your book. One is that I think it provides a really rich, comprehensive survey of the TESCREAL ideologies. I think it's a great introduction to how all of these ideologies fit together, what the key claims that they make are. And then, in addition to this highly accessible overview, there's also a number of really interesting, compelling novel arguments that you present. And as I've indicated on a few occasions during our conversation, I mean, there were many moments reading your book where I thought, that's a really good way of putting that. Or I've never thought about it quite like that. And I've been in this space for a really long time. So those are, for me, the two main reasons that the book is absolutely worth reading. And also, there's a fair amount of ridicule. It's pretty amusing to read. And more than any other book I've read on this topic, one comes away with the sense that these ideologies are a joke. They're just a joke. There's so much pseudoscience, there's so much bullshit and nonsense that it would be genuinely hilarious if the ideologues who are part of this TESCREAL movement didn't have so much power, influence, clout, reach, and so on. So anyways, I thought your book was really, really fantastic.
Thank you.
Highly recommended. And thank you so much for having this lengthy chat with us today.
Of course.
It was so nice to meet you. And thanks for letting us joke around as well.
Well, of course. No, that's the whole point, is to have fun.
Yeah.
Thank you, Kate, and thank you, Emil. This is really a lot of fun. Thank you for having me. And thank you for talking about these ideas and also for being such thoughtful readers of my book.
Thank you for writing it. And we hope you come back to the show.
I'd be happy to come back anytime.
See you again sometime
See you soon.
soon.
Thank you so
See you
much.
soon.